They weren't treated like soldiers, they were hunted like criminals. During World War II, the SS earned a terrifying reputation, but when the Red Army captured them, their fate was far harsher than that of regular German soldiers, marked by revenge and brutality.
The outlook on life was, well, get the job done and finish with.
Here's the thing, you couldn't mistake the SS for regular soldiers. They weren't just another branch of the German army, they were the fanatics, the elite shock troops, hand-picked to fight harder, kill faster, and obey without hesitation. Everywhere they marched, stories followed, massacres in villages, executions, and burning homes. Civilians feared them like ghosts in the night, and Soviet soldiers carried their rage like fire whenever they faced them. To the Soviets, the SS weren't men in uniforms. They were symbols of Nazi terror, the ones who dragged millions into camps, who shot innocents in cold blood. So when an SS man was captured, the reaction wasn't the same as with a regular Wehrmacht soldier. No respect, no prisoner of war honor, just pure seething hatred. And that hatred would soon erupt into something far more brutal. This part shocked me because the Soviets had made it an official policy. Wehrmacht soldiers, even if they were enemies, got POW status. But the SS? They were automatically stamped as war criminals. Orders came straight from Stalin and the NKVD. No mercy. The Red Army didn't have to treat them like prisoners. They could be interrogated, tortured, or executed on the spot. Imagine this. A Soviet soldier watches his family starve, his village burn, and then sees an SS man surrender. Do you think he's handing over bread and water? Not a chance. The Soviets saw every captured SS as payback. They weren't protecting the Geneva Conventions. They were seeking revenge for millions of dead. And the further the Red Army marched west, the harsher it became. However, things really escalated at a pivotal turning point in 1943. And here's where the story takes a dark turn: the Battle of Kursk, specifically Prokhorovka, one of the largest tank clashes in history. The SS divisions rolled in with arrogance, armed to the teeth, ready to crush. But after days of brutal combat, Soviet forces pushed them back. And when SS men were finally captured, there was no forgiveness waiting. Survivors described Red Army soldiers beating, shooting, and even refusing to take them alive. To the Soviets, Prokhorovka wasn't just a battlefield, it was personal. These were the same units that had torched villages and killed civilians. Capturing them wasn't about war rules, it was vengeance. Whispers spread fast among German troops. If you wore the SS runes, your chances of surviving Soviet captivity were close to zero. And from that battle onward, the Red Army's treatment of captured SS only grew harsher. Just when it seemed the front was collapsing, the true horror for SS men began. During the retreats around Kharkiv, not everyone made it back to safety. Those left behind faced a fate worse than bullets. Soviet soldiers weren't the only ones waiting. Civilians, people whose families had been slaughtered, whose homes had been torched, finally had their chance. Villagers dragged captured SS men into the streets, beating them, hanging them, and sometimes even burning them alive. For once, the balance of power flipped. The same black uniformed terror that once walked proudly through occupied towns now begged for mercy and got none. Word spread quickly among the SS. Falling into Soviet hands was bad enough. Falling into the hands of civilians you'd terrorized, that was a nightmare with no escape. And then came Majdanek. In 1944, the Red Army stumbled onto something the world hadn't seen before, the first major Nazi concentration camp to be liberated. Inside, they found piles of shoes, mountains of ashes, gas chambers, and starved survivors. The truth was undeniable. This was no military prison, it was industrialized murder. The SS guards caught at Majdanek had no trial, no chance. Soviet soldiers, burning with rage, executed many on the spot. Others were dragged away, beaten until they couldn't walk. The liberation of Majdanek lit a fire inside the Red Army. From that moment, SS men weren't just enemies, they were monsters. And monsters in the eyes of the Soviets didn't deserve to live.
No, damn you.
But the climax of it all, the fall of Berlin, was the last chapter in the SS's brutal fate. By April 1945, the city was a fortress of desperation. The SS fought fanatically, house by house, knowing capture meant death. In those final days, surrender wasn't an option. Many SS men chose suicide over Soviet hands. Those who didn't, they faced immediate execution. Soviet troops had no patience left. Captured SS were lined up against walls, shot without hesitation, or dragged through the streets by furious soldiers and civilians alike. And the stories of vengeance didn't stop there. Some SS men were hauled to makeshift camps, where torture and starvation awaited. Others were beaten to death in the ruins of the city itself. Berlin was not just a defeat, it was a reckoning. For the SS, there was no glory, no honor, only the cold hand of revenge. And here's where it gets even darker, the NKVD's methods of dealing with captured SS. Interrogation wasn't about rules or conventions. It was about breaking men down until nothing was left. SS prisoners were dragged into dim basements, beaten with rifle butts, stripped naked, and left in freezing cells. Sleep deprivation, starvation, and endless hours of questioning became routine. Torture wasn't the exception, it was the method. Hot irons, brutal beatings, mock executions. The Soviets used every tactic to rip secrets from the SS, troop positions, supply lines, hidden officers. And even when a man confessed, it didn't save him. Many were shot afterward, their bodies tossed into shallow graves, nameless, forgotten. The NKVD didn't see this as cruelty, they saw it as justice. In their eyes, every scream from an SS prisoner was one step closer to avenging the millions slaughtered across Eastern Europe. For the SS, capture wasn't survival. It was a death sentence played out slowly, painfully, and deliberately.
One of the most notorious prison camps she wrote about in his work The Gulag Archipelago. He said that in a period of political change, it's important that people do not forget about the victims of the labor camps. Solzhenitsyn himself spent 8 years in the Gulag. It was after he won the Nobel Prize for Literature for his chronicle of suffering in the camps that he was arrested on treason charges. He was expelled from the country and was taken by train under KGB guard to Germany.
But for the lucky ones spared execution, another nightmare awaited: Soviet labor camps. These weren't prisons, they were slow-motion graves. Starvation diets, brutal work in freezing mines and forests, and disease that spread faster than medicine could cure. Guards treated SS men worse than animals, stripping away every shred of dignity. And the NKVD kept records, cold clinical lists known as death books. Page after page filled with names and causes of death, exhaustion, dysentery, and malnutrition. Survival rates for captured SS hovered close to zero. A bullet to the head was merciful compared to years of grinding down in these camps. But the Soviets weren't done with the SS. Not physically, not mentally. They weaponized them for propaganda. Captured SS men were paraded in front of cameras and forced to confess their crimes. Their broken voices and their hollow eyes are broadcast across Soviet films. The message was simple: this is what happens to your so-called elite. These films weren't just for Soviet citizens. They were aimed at German soldiers still fighting, seeing their own invincible SS leaders humiliated, tortured, and confessing on camera. It crushed morale. For the Soviets, every confession wasn't just revenge, it was psychological warfare, turning the SS's own fear and shame into a weapon against the Reich. And even when the war ended, the hunt didn't. The Soviets didn't just stop at Berlin. They scoured Austria, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Germany itself, searching for SS men hiding in barns, forests, or civilian clothes. NKVD units dragged them out in the dead of night. Many weren't even taken to camps. They were shot in fields, hanged in village squares, or executed in cellars with no witnesses but the walls. Mass graves swallowed them whole. Decades later, when the soil was dug up, skeletons were found still bound, still blindfolded, silent proof of a purge carried out in secret. For the SS, there was no escape, no hiding place. The Red Army and NKVD hunted them like prey until almost none remained.
Molim vas, pomozite, još je živ. Još ga možete spasiti.
And the shadow of punishment didn't stop with the soldiers. The Soviets believed in collective blame. Wives, children, parents, anyone connected to an SS man could be marked as guilty by association. Families were deported to Siberia, stripped of homes and possessions, and left to freeze or starve in exile. Children grew up carrying the stain of their father's black uniform, even if they had never seen the front lines. This wasn't justice, it was retribution on a wider scale. To the Red Army and NKVD, the SS wasn't just an enemy on the battlefield. It was a disease to be wiped out, root and branch. And in that fury, even the innocent bore the weight of vengeance. When the dust of war finally settled, the numbers told a chilling story. Out of the tens of thousands of SS men captured by the Soviets, only about 2.7% ever came back alive. The rest vanished into graves by roadsides, into frozen camps, into the pages of death books locked in NKVD archives. For decades, families searched for answers only to find silence. Even now, mass graves uncovered in forests and fields reveal the scale of what happened. The Soviets didn't just defeat the SS, they erased them. And that legacy lingers as one of the most brutal, unforgiving acts of retribution in the entire war. For the SS, capture by the Red Army was a death sentence. Unlike regular POWs, they faced revenge, torture, and near extinction. Their brutal fate remains one of the darkest chapters of World War II's end. So, what's your take? Drop a comment, like, and subscribe for more.